At the prestigious International Congress of Lost Languages, the auditorium at the University of Sao Paulo buzzed with anticipation. Renowned linguists from across the world gathered to decipher a mysterious stone inscription, recently discovered in the interior of Minas Gerais. But what happened next completely shattered Dr. Roberto Manzini's image as a brilliant polyglot and academic. Dr. Manzini, a man who prided himself on speaking 30 languages, had spent the last 3 hours attempting to decode the symbols projected on the screen. He was frustrated and, in his irritation, began mocking the entire situation. His cruel laughter echoed throughout the hall as he pointed toward a young girl, just 16 years old, who was quietly cleaning coffee break tables at the back of the room. Leticia Santos, the daughter of the university's cleaning staff, stood motionless, her cleaning cloth still in her hands. "You know," Dr. Manzini smirked, "perhaps this young lady over there can decipher these symbols better than we can. Maybe she has a different perspective." His words dripped with contempt, and the silence in the room grew heavier. Leticia, calm and composed, looked at the screen, then back at the smug linguist. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but because those symbols were familiar to her. They weren't just random shapes. They were the language of her ancestors, passed down through generations. The room grew tense as her mother, Donna Carmen, quickly stepped forward, trying to protect her daughter. "Roberto, this has gone too far," she murmured, embarrassed. But Dr. Manzini, intoxicated by his own arrogance, ignored her concern. He was determined to humiliate Leticia in front of the crowd. "You're just a girl," he sneered. "What could you possibly know about this?" But Leticia wasn't just any girl. She wasn't simply the cleaning staff's daughter. By the age of 12, Leticia had become a self-taught linguistic prodigy, mastering 6 languages, including Latin, French, and Yoruba. She had corresponded with European scholars under a pseudonym, contributing to research on the preservation of African languages. She had even decoded the grammatical structure of Yoruba chants by listening to them at her neighbors' toreros, demonstrating an exceptional understanding of languages that the experts in the room could never grasp. The most valuable knowledge she carried, however, wasn't found in books. It came from her great-grandfather, Samuel, the last living keeper of a secret language developed by fugitive slaves in Brazil. This code, used by enslaved communities to communicate while evading slave hunters, was known only to a select few. Samuel had passed it down to Leticia, and now she was about to reveal its power, when Dr. Manzini, in his arrogance, dared to mock Leticia again. She calmly responded, "I recognize this writing because my great-grandfather taught it to me. He was one of the last to know the language of the fugitives." The room fell silent. Dr. Manzini blinked in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what he had just heard. "Your great-grandfather, a linguist," he chuckled mockingly. "And where exactly did he study? At the University of Life?" Leticia's voice, though soft, was clear as she responded with unwavering confidence. "No, he was a Kwalula, one of the last to speak the language of the fugitive slaves." The word Kwalula hung in the air, foreign and mysterious to many of the scholars in the room. Dr. Manzini's smile faltered as he processed the weight of her statement. Leticia was not just speaking from an academic perspective. She was sharing a living history, one that had been suppressed and overlooked by the very people who now sought to study it. The room, once filled with smug superiority, now bristled with discomfort. Dr. Manzini, whose career had been built on condescending displays of knowledge, suddenly found himself confronted by a teenager whose wisdom was rooted in centuries of cultural memory. The arrogance that had defined him for so long now seemed absurd in the face of Leticia's quiet dignity. In that moment, Leticia Santos rewrote the history of Brazilian linguistics. She didn't need a prestigious degree or an academic title to prove her worth. Her knowledge was authentic, born from the very people whose lives had been ignored and erased by mainstream academia. And in the process, she taught the world that underestimating someone based on their social status or background is not only a mistake, it is a tragic loss of understanding. As the auditorium fell into stunned silence, Leticia's simple words echoed louder than any academic debate ever could. She had turned Dr. Manzini's cruel laughter into a lesson that no one would forget, a lesson about humility, respect, and the power of knowledge that transcends social boundaries. Nervous laughter rippled through the auditorium as Leticia Santos stood calmly before a room full of Brazil's most renowned linguists. Donna Carmen, her mother, felt a wave of emotion rise within her. Anger, yes, but not the kind that shouts. This was quiet, potent, a fire long kept at bay. Letitia, on the other hand, remained unshaken, her heart steady, her mind focused. This moment wasn't about proving herself to the world. It was about honoring the wisdom of her ancestors, wisdom that had been passed down through generations of resistance. Dr. Roberto Manzini, the famous polyglot, continued his mockery as he pointed to the inscription on the screen, trying to impose his own understanding of it. "You're reading these symbols as if they were old Portuguese, aren't you?" He sneered. Letitia, undeterred, interrupted him gently, "Because it's not ancient Portuguese. It's a language of resistance." The room fell into a stunned silence. Dr. Manzini's eyes narrowed in disbelief, and a discomfort stirred in his stomach. Letitia's calm voice, unwavering and confident, had already begun to dismantle his arrogance. "Resistance?" he repeated, scoffing. "And you, a young girl, are the only person in Brazil who understands this so-called language of resistance?" Letitia responded with quiet certainty. "My great-grandfather died 5 years ago. He told me I was the last." The simplicity with which she spoke this devastating truth made the whole room pause. The words were not laden with drama. They were a quiet statement of fact. Even Dr. Manzini was momentarily taken aback, undeterred by his scorn. Letitia pressed on. "He was one of the last keepers of the language of the fugitive slaves, a language created for secret communication between Columbambos." The word Columbambo fell from her lips like a key unlocking the past, one that Dr. Manzini couldn't begin to understand. He chuckled, trying to dismiss her knowledge. "How creative," he said. "And where exactly did you learn about hybrid linguistic structures?" "YouTube." But Letitia was not the naive teenager he thought she was. Professor Helena Carvalho, an expert in African languages, now leaned forward, her academic curiosity piqued. Letitia's analysis was not that of an amateur. It was sophisticated, rooted in deep understanding. "Please continue," Helena urged, ignoring Dr. Manzini's dismissive glare. Letitia pointed to the symbols on the screen. "This first symbol that you interpreted as mountain actually means place to hide. And in this one is not river. It's the path that disappears. The full translation reads, where the path that disappears meets the place to hide. The Brothers of Freedom left their names." The impact of her words was immediate and profound. Dr. Manzini, still clinging to his belief in his own superiority, muttered, "This is just folklore, speculation." But Letitia wasn't finished. With quiet poise, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a well-worn notebook. "I can prove it," she said. "This was left to me by my great-grandfather. His notes on the language of the Columbambos." Helena stood up, her eyes fixed on the notebook with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Dr. Manzini tried to dismiss the moment. "Helena, you can't be serious. Are we really going to give credibility to a family story notebook?" But Helena was already walking toward the stage, her hands reaching for the pages, her eyes wide with intellectual hunger. As she flipped through the yellowed pages, her expression transformed. These were no mere family stories. The pages contained complex phonetic diagrams, grammatical structures, and cross-references to African languages. "My God," Helena whispered. "This is academic-level work." Samuel Santos systematically documented a language we thought was lost forever. Dr. Manzini's face drained of color. "Samuel Santos?" he stammered. Helena nodded, her voice filled with reverence. He was one of the leading figures in Afro-Brazilian linguistics in the 1980s. He published groundbreaking articles before disappearing from academia. Letitia swallowed hard. The weight of her great-grandfather's legacy now laid bare. "He didn't want to talk to universities anymore. He preferred to teach the children in our community." Helena looked at Letitia, her astonishment growing. "You're Samuel Santos's granddaughter." "Great-granddaughter," Letitia corrected, her voice steady, her sense of self now undeniable. Dr. Manzini's arrogance crumbled. He had been so sure of his own knowledge, so certain of his superiority. But now, facing Letitia, he realized he was in the presence of something far greater than academic credentials. Letitia wasn't just a teenager with a story. She was the keeper of a lost language, a bridge between the past and the present, a voice that had long been ignored but would no longer be silenced. The room fell into a heavy silence, and the tide of academic respect shifted. Leticia had turned the tide of this humiliating spectacle into a triumph that would forever change the understanding of Brazilian linguistics. She wasn't just teaching them a language, she was teaching them humility, respect, and the power of true wisdom. The auditorium fell into an eerie silence as Leticia Santos, standing confidently in front of Brazil's leading linguists, prepared to rewrite history. Dr. Roberto Manzini, renowned for his linguistic prowess, had spent hours trying to decipher the ancient symbols projected on the screen. But Leticia, with the calm authority of someone who had inherited the wisdom of her ancestors, was about to reveal something far more profound than anyone had anticipated. "Dr. Manzini," she began, her voice steady but commanding, "you've spent 3 hours trying to read these symbols as if they were archaic Portuguese. But my great-grandfather taught me that the language of the Quambos was never about hiding obvious meanings. It was about creating layers of protection." Her words hung in the air, and Dr. Manzini's smug expression faltered. Leticia pointed to a specific sequence of symbols on the screen. "Look at this pattern here," she continued. "You interpreted it as a verb in the past tense, but it's actually a temporal marker, indicating a message to the future. This entire inscription is not a letter to contemporaries. It's a letter to descendants." The room was silent, everyone hanging on her every word. Professor Helena, who had been quietly reading the notebook Leticia had brought with her, gasped as she flipped through the pages. "Leticia," she said, her voice shaking with awe, "your great-grandfather didn't just document this language. He created a transliteration system, a method that allows anyone who is literate to learn its basic structure. He believed that knowledge should not die with him." Leticia nodded, her words carrying the weight of generations. "That's right. The language of the Quambos was designed not just to protect the message, but to preserve the history and the resilience of the people who spoke it." Dr. Manzini's arrogance had begun to crack. He looked around, his frustration growing. The professors, once skeptical, were now on edge, their pens scribbling frantically as they absorbed the gravity of what Leticia was revealing. His voice trembled. "This is ridiculous. Are we really going to give credence to a cleaning lady who shows up with an old notebook and some fanciful theories?" The silence that followed was chilling. Even the professors who had laughed at his previous jokes were now looking at him with discomfort, as if realizing that he had crossed a line from academic debate to outright disrespect. Professor Helena, cutting through the tension, spoke with authority. "Roberto, I suggest you sit down and listen. If what Leticia is showing us is true, and all the evidence points to it, you have just tried to discredit one of the greatest linguistic discoveries of the decade." Dona Carmen, who had been standing at the back of the auditorium, felt tears streaming down her face. But these were not tears of shame. They were tears of pride. Her daughter, a young woman with the quiet strength of their ancestors, was commanding the attention of the brightest minds in the country. Leticia took a deep breath. "Professor Manzini," she said, addressing him directly, "may I continue with a complete translation? What my great-grandfather left on this stone is not just a message. It's a map." The word map hung in the air. Helena leaned forward in her seat, her curiosity piqued. "A map?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Yes," Leticia replied. "This is not just an inscription. It contains coordinates, not geographical coordinates, but linguistic clues pointing to where the Kumbalas hid more records of their language. If you had managed to translate the first inscription correctly, you would have seen that." The realization hit the room like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a translation, it was a discovery that could transform the field of linguistics. The audience was now riveted, their attention fully locked on Leticia as she continued, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "Over the past 4 years," Leticia said, "an international team and I have located and translated 17 different inscriptions, each containing more linguistic clues, more hidden messages. This is not folklore. It's the systematic preservation of a language that was almost lost." Dr. Manzini sat down, his face pale as the weight of the discovery settled on him. His arrogance, once unshakable, now seemed painfully out of place. Leticia was not just a teenager with a fanciful theory. She was a linguist, a researcher, and the heir to a hidden legacy that had been ignored for far too long. Professor Helena, her voice filled with reverence, asked, "Who is the lead author of this study?" Leticia clicked to the next slide on the projector. revealing a meticulously organized presentation titled Linguistic Mapping of the Columbombos of Minas Gerais, an International Collaborative Study. The name of the lead author sent a shockwave through the room. L. Silveira, University of Oxford, Department of Applied Linguistics. Dr. Manzini muttered, "Impossible." But his words were swallowed by the collective gasp of the professors around him. "El Silveira?" Helena whispered. "You're telling me El Silveira is part of your team?" Letitia nodded. "Yes, Professor Silveira has been collaborating with me since I was 12. My research has been recognized internationally." As she moved through her slides, the full scope of Letitia's work became clear. Maps, data tables, and comparative linguistic analyses filled the screen. It wasn't the work of a teenager. It was the result of years of meticulous research at the highest level. Letitia wasn't just translating ancient symbols. She was rewriting the history of Brazil's linguistic preservation. The room was now abuzz with excitement and admiration. Professor Carlos Medina whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "El Silva, Letitia Silva Santos. She's on Nature magazine's list of the most promising young researchers. She has a full scholarship to Oxford waiting for her to finish high school." Dr. Manzini's world began to crumble. His career, built on the assumption that only those with the right academic pedigree could make meaningful contributions, was now in ruins. Letitia, the daughter of a cleaning lady, had just shown the world that the greatest discoveries don't always come from the places we expect. They often come from the most unlikely of sources, ones that society has overlooked and underestimated. With a final, icy politeness, Letitia addressed Dr. Manzini. "Would you like to know how I found out you would be here today? I saw your email to Professor Richardson, asking for advice on primitive Afro-Brazilian dialects for your presentation." The entire room went silent as Letitia revealed the email exchange. Dr. Manzini had sought consultation on the very subject he had tried to dismiss, proving that he had underestimated not just Letitia, but the power of the knowledge she carried. As the audience absorbed the weight of her words, Letitia's message was clear. Knowledge, like language, cannot be confined to one person, one community, or one history. It belongs to everyone, and it is far more powerful than any prejudice or arrogance. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as Letitia Santos, poised and unshaken, continued her rebuttal to Dr. Roberto Manzini. With calm precision, she began unraveling the truth, her voice steady but carrying a weight that no one could ignore. "Dr. Manzini," she said, her tone polite yet devastating, "you are literally asking for help from the same person you just tried to publicly humiliate." The auditorium grew still, the tension thickening. Letitia continued, undeterred by the silence that now hung in the air. "My response, which you obviously didn't receive, was clear. You asked to speak only with senior researchers, but my reply was, the inscription you're analyzing is part of a linguistic system I've been studying for years. It would be an honor to mentor you personally." The words echoed in the room, leaving Dr. Manzini visibly pale, his arrogance deflating like air from a punctured balloon. Letitia's eyes locked onto his, unwavering. "I came here today expecting to meet Dr. Roberto Manzini, a respected academic who had read my articles and wanted to collaborate. Instead, I found someone who thought he could use me for his own cruel entertainment." Professor Helena, standing nearby, was now visibly enraged, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Roberto, you tried to humiliate one of the greatest promises in world linguistics, someone who has already contributed more at just 16 than many of us have in decades." The sting of the truth hit. Dr. Manzini tried to speak, but his words faltered, unable to form around the growing reality of his humiliation. Around him, his colleagues, who had once laughed at his cruel jokes, now looked at him with discomfort, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Letitia, however, remained calm and resolute. "The saddest part," she continued, saving her final blow, "is that you really are competent. I read your articles from the 1990s. They were good, but at some point, you began confusing knowledge with arrogance, competence with superiority." The final slide flashed onto the screen, revealing Letitia's academic resume. 3 published articles in international journals, 2 presentations at European conferences, fluency in 7 languages, and a list of collaborations with top universities around the world. "I am not the lucky daughter of a cleaning lady," she said, locking eyes with Dr. Manzini. I am Leticia Santos, a linguist and researcher at Oxford University, specializing in the preservation of African languages in Brazil. And yes, I am also the daughter of Dona Carmen, who works with dignity to support our family while I study. The room was still as Dr. Manzini's face drained of color. He finally managed to stammer, I didn't know. How could I have known? Leticia's response was sharp, her calmness slicing through his feeble excuse. That's exactly the problem, Dr. Manzini. You never bothered to find out. You saw a black girl cleaning tables and immediately decided I couldn't have anything of value to offer. Your prejudice is so deep that you can't even recognize excellence when it's right in front of you. The murmurs that spread through the auditorium were filled with discomfort, but they were also filled with realization. Some professors were now photographing the slides, saving every piece of evidence that proved Leticia's brilliance. Dona Carmen, standing at the back of the room, was openly crying, not out of shame, but of immense pride. Her daughter had not only defended herself, she had completely redefined the narrative. Professor Helena, now standing tall, addressed Dr. Manzini one last time. Roberto, I believe you have some apologies to make and explanations to give to this university's ethics committee. But Dr. Manzini, now realizing the full extent of his downfall, gathered his papers with trembling hands. His career, built on self-promotion and arrogance disguised as competence, had crumbled in mere moments. As he exited the room, Leticia called after him one last time, her voice carrying an authority that no one would dare challenge. Dr. Manzini, she said, her words dripping with ironic politeness, do you still want my help with your research? Dr. Manzini hurried out, leaving behind not just his reputation, but his entire career. Leticia, standing on that stage, had not only rewritten the rules of the game, but she had reminded everyone that true greatness cannot be suppressed by prejudice or ignorance. Months later, Dr. Manzini watched, broken and alone, as the news announced Leticia's acceptance into Oxford University as the youngest associate researcher in the university's history. His career was in ruins, his television appearances cancelled, his old articles questioned. Meanwhile, Leticia became an international sensation. The Brazilian government launched a national language preservation program under her guidance, and Netflix bought the rights to her story. Dona Carmen, now a coordinator at the cultural center Leticia founded, taught children about their cultural and linguistic heritage. Her salary was 10 times higher than before. Leticia, in her most famous interview, summed up her journey with these words: "The best revenge is not to destroy those who harm us. It is to build something so extraordinary that they spend the rest of their lives wondering how they failed to see our greatness when it was right before their eyes." Dr. Manzini, alone in his apartment, turned off the television. He had learned too late that competence isn't defined by skin color or social status, but by the depth of knowledge and strength of character. Leticia had proven to the world that genius can be born anywhere, and no amount of prejudice can stop it from flourishing. If you enjoyed this incredible story of resilience, intellect, and the power of truth, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that challenge the status quo and celebrate true greatness. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of these powerful journeys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.